A series of corporate scandals in recent years has highlighted the need for a stronger mechanism to protect investors. The question is, whose responsibility is this? In this program, Professor Jim Cox, professor of law at Duke University, and Mr. John Brewer, a barrister at Pacific Chambers in Central, share their own views on this issue. Professor Cox begins by emphasizing the roles of CEOs and independent auditors in ensuring that a firm is protected from fraud. He also reflects on some of the lessons to be learned from the collapse of Enron.
What I'd like to talk about is that the first line of defense on risk management, as this conference has developed, is governance. Governance covers a lot of areas. But that's the most visible area, that is the marriage of governance today to securities regulations, an area that I have a foot in each of those camps. And it relates to the discussions that investor confidence and the vitality of capital markets, wherever they are, depends on the quality of the reporting practices that go on in those markets. And this is an increasingly difficult area, assuring investor confidence, partly for the reasons that were, I think, most dramatically illustrated in yesterday's presentation by Edith Shi. You may remember that somewhere embedded in those 86 PowerPoints that she mentioned, somewhere in the middle, was this elaborate partial flow chart, which was just boggling, that had all these little boxes, and it was describing some part of the organization, Hutchinson, not the entire organization. And that's reflective of the multifaceted business enterprises that are traded on exchanges, in which investors commit their funds, in which not only do investors commit their funds, but they actually commit their future to as well, their retirement. And that is the integrity of that financial reporting process all the way through the organization and ultimately out into the investment community. And the way in which we make sure that the reporting process is reliable and trustworthy is through good governance procedures. So part of the challenge that we face today is that the organizations are no longer flat. They have many boxes, and numbers percolate up from the bottom, and you have 400,000 employees, as Hutchinson has, and you're operating on 5 different continents and number of divisions. How do you know that some subsection down there isn't a dark hole just waiting to have a problem for you? How many organizations are we aware of where that's exactly the cause for the whole organization's implosion? The other challenge is not just in addition to this elaborate business arrangement that's so common to publicly traded firms, is the evolution of accounting standards. In 2005, the Hong Kong markets followed those of Europe, and where it was mandated within the EU that public companies move to IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, which are issued by the International Accounting Standards Board. Now, IFRS is a very new and intriguing device. It's now the business language. We all know accounting is the language of business. It is the business language used in a little over 100 different countries around the world. It is the dominant language. It's issued, as I pointed out, by the International Accounting Standards Board. And as you would expect, it's labeled as principles-based because it requires and embodies more generalized standards. The generalization of these accounting metrics comes from a couple of different forces. One force is that since it's attempting to reflect practices that are acceptable and doable across the globe, not just centric to one country, there needs to be a certain generalization to be able to be attractive to the reporting cultures that exist in a number of countries. So that's part of the social forces that are shaping IFRS, and explains its more generalized texture than you would expect, for example, in my home country, United States, GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. The other reason is that IFRS is pretty young. It doesn't have, as does the financial accounting standards issued by our FASB in America, it does not have a 30-year history. Nor does it have a 70-year history of U.S. accounting principles. And so you don't have the accretion of experience, the adding of experience to this skeletal outline, giving it muscles and tendons that gives it a fully textured body, as does U.S. GAAP. The result of that is IFRS is, whether correctly or incorrectly, referred to as principles-based. But what that really means when we refer to it as being principles-based is that it's much more general, and it has principles. And principles means it requires people to apply those principles. And the application of principles means that there's elements of judgment. And we all know that accounting is not a science. It's always been filled with estimates, assumptions, and judgments all the way along. And it's with IFRS that this is more pronounced. So how does this relate to your theme of your conference? It's the idea that judgment and policing that judgment comes back to governance. That is to say, what's very important to enhance the transparency, the trustworthiness of reporting practices, whether they be in Shanghai, Hong Kong, London, Frankfurt, whatever market you choose, where IFRS is the rule, that you need to make sure that there's a reliable, trustworthy process within the business organization for transmitting the performance and position of a division, of a department, or the whole firm itself up the line and then out to investors. So, the problem here is that all the way along the line, everybody's using the same rule book. It's called IFRS, whether it be a department, whether it be a division, or the whole company itself. But at every place along the way, there's judgments and discretion that have to occur. And the key to policing these judgments is a reliable and transparent internal control systems. Even more important today than it was probably 15 or 20 years ago. And that is to say, if you're sitting on top of the pyramid, first of all, congratulations. You worked hard. You've earned your position. You're on the top of the pyramid. And you, nevertheless, have to make sure that all the subordinate organizations whose information is flowing up to you are playing by the rule book as you understand the rule book to be. The practice is having various division heads certify the performance of their operation, that these reports that are being sent up the line are in conformance with the reporting practices of the firm, and you believe they fairly and truthfully present the financial position and performance of your department, your division, et cetera, your subsidiary, all the way up. That's how the CEO at the top is able to provide his or her own certification. Now, the certification is roundly condemned in the United States as a empty, and in many parts of the world, I must say, as a very empty process because it's not going to discourage fraud. This is probably true, but the certification process was never brought in, and in fact, the studies that have now been made in the now almost 5 years of experience that we've had with certifications at division levels as well as at company levels indicate that that's not what people see this about. That the certification process in which, again, the executive sits down is to make them sort of stop, look, and listen, and look and think about the numbers and ask some good questions. And repeatedly we're now finding in business circles and surveys of business executives that they're